1997, a series of terrifying events unfolded aboard the Russian space station Mir. Space stations are like floating homes for astronauts, cramped but incredible laboratories in the vacuum of space. Back in the 18s and 19s, Mir was a technological marvel, a symbol of human ambition orbiting Earth. But behind that achievement was a ticking clock. And in February 1997, things just went very wrong. American astronaut Jerry Ranger was living and working on Mir with his Russian crewmates when disaster struck. Before talk about the disaster, if you don't subscribe to my channel, just subscribe. Okay, let us go on to the disaster event. One night in the Quad 1 motor, a oxygen generating device, a system that burns chemicals to release breathable air, suddenly caught fire. A roaring blast erupted in the tiny sealed space. Smoke filled the station instantly. The fire raged for 40 minutes, an eternity. When there is no exit, visibility dropped to zero. They couldn't even see their own hands. The crew scrambled for gas masks, the lifeline, but not all of them worked. Some were faulty, likely degraded after years in space. By then, Mir was already 11 years old. Operating well past its intended lifespan, maintenance in orbit is difficult and expensive. Supplies arrived regularly, but time and wear had taken a toll. Even the fire extinguishers were strapped down too tightly to access quickly. Chaos, smoke, malfunctioning equipment, and no way out. Eventually, the fire burned itself out, but not before injuring some of the crew. But Ninja, a physician, treated the burns. He documented everything in a detailed report for NASA. But NASA, hoping not to panic the public, downplayed the fire, calling it a learning opportunity for future missions. In truth, this was not even the first fire. A similar incident had occurred before. The same type of oxygen generator had briefly ignited due to contamination. Later investigations pointed to hydrocarbons from something as small as latex gloves, but that was just the beginning. Fast forward to June 1997, another near-fatal situation unfolded. This time involving astronaut Michael Foley, who was on the Mir with crewmates Asliu Siplio Alexander Lazuka. Foley was fluent in Russian, which helped him to fit in. He heard of the earlier fire but assumed it had been resolved, but he was wrong. One day, a Progress cargo ship meant to deliver supplies like food and equipment approached for docking. The crew watched the procedure expecting routine, but suddenly Progress slammed into the station. A direct collision, the impact tore a hole in the Spectre model. Instantly, air began rushing out into space, the worst nightmare in orbit. Thing that could happen in space without air, the astronauts wouldn't have survived long. They had only 23 minutes before they would lose consciousness. Dara went through NASA's intense training and were prepared for stuff like this. Michael went to the Soyuz capsule, a space station lifeboat. If things got worse, he planned to use it to escape back to Earth. He was waiting for his crewmates, but to his shock, they didn't show up instant. They stayed behind to find the hole and fix the station. In situations like this, it's prescribed not to risk it and evacuate. But Vasily and Alexander decided to try and save it. Michael was waiting for them, but he could hear them shouting to each other in Russian as they hopelessly tried to fix things. Time was running out. There was only some minutes of air left, and finally they managed to seal the broken model and stop the airline. But just as they thought they could take a breath, another problem came up. The crash had damaged the station's solar panels. In just moments, the entire space station lost all its power. No lights, no fans to circulate air, and no way to talk to anyone on Earth. And to make things worse, because of the collision, Mir started spinning out of control. It was a total catastrophe. Michael had an idea to stop the spinning. They could use engines on the Soyuz capsule to push the station and stabilize it. They decided to try it. Unfortunately, the first attempt only made things worse. The spinning got faster, but they decided to try it again, this time using short bursts of the engines, and eventually it worked. The station stopped spinning and they were safe again, and a think they are going home after that. But even after this terrifying experience, Michael stay on Mir for 4 more months to finish his missions. Later in 1995, he went back to space and even set a record for the longest spacewalk at the time. 8.5 hours outside the spaceship, but Mir was just getting worse. The stress of living there was so intense that Vasily Sibiu developed heart problems during that mission. Literally the same year, just a couple of months later in August, another disaster struck. The main computer suddenly went down. This left the station just drafting in space with no control. Without this computer, Mir couldn't align its solar panels with the sun. This meant that the station's battery were drained rapidly in the space. No power means no communication and no life support. And remember the Progress supply ship? Well, this power outage happened exactly when another Progress ship was trying to dock, just like the previous one. But now the computers that controlled the process was not talking each other properly. Commander Anatoly Silvia had to take over manually and it got wild because the monitors on the Progress ship was not working. He had to use a monitor on mirror to see what the supply ship, so it was like trying to park a car using a camera feed from someone else's dashboard. When the supply ship got just a couple of feet away from docking, now the screen went completely blank, so Silvia couldn't see anything. He could only pray and guess, but miraculously he nailed it. The docking back, the main computer was still down, and Mir was spinning rapidly. The crew had to save the remaining power as much as possible and stopped the spinning, so they shut down all unnecessary systems and run for the Suez model. They decided to try what Michael did before them, to fire the capsule's engines in short bursts and push Mir back into position. They had to steer the station manually, and with no motor tools to guide them, they had to rely on the stars like sailors hundreds of years ago. Finally, the spinning stopped, but they still only had a few days of air. After that, they have to rely on chemical candles device that burn to produce oxygen but also carry the risk of fire, and fire, as Mir's history sure was not something they wanted to mess with. While the scientists were trying to reassure everyone on Earth that things were under control, the crew began fixing the broken computer. This task took us all in darkness because there were no solar panels, but somehow they managed to repair it. After that, the astronauts had to face the sun to recharge Mir's batteries. Only then they could even think about tackling the long list of other repairs like fixing the still damaged Spectre model. Mir had turned to a survival reality show. Once Mir was over a decade old, it became known for its cluttered interiors. It was full of broken equipment, leftover supplies, leaking pipes, and all sorts of odd junk floating around. The astronaut said that it was hard to move and felt like living inside a dirty, leaking submarine. Then another huge issue was molded, started growing on walls in air vents and even on the astronaut's personal items. Now imagine this, dealing with all of that in zero gravity. While trying to conduct experiments, finally in March 2001, after 50 years in space, Mir was finally internationally deorbited. It broke apart in Earth's atmosphere and burned up over the Pacific Ocean. Well, despite all the problems, Mir paved the way for the International Space Station that is still working to this day. That is for today. If you like this video, just subscribe, like, share. Bye everyone.